president except the board president, and as vice president, I will be the presiding officer tonight.
Mr. Vice President, can I jump in real quick? Can you hear him okay? Okay, just a reminder, we're in this seating arrangement again. We got 3 mics that are picking us up, so make sure we project out there. Okay, thank you.
I'll do my best. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you all. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad you all came out on this hot day. So I'm not supposed to get 100 degrees in July, but so there you go sometimes in Texas. We've got a pretty good agenda tonight. We've got a budget workshop, stuff on our strategic plan. We're going to hire some people. So we're going to get right into that tonight. First thing we're going to do is public comments. And we'll get right into that. The board of trustees will now hear public comments. In order to provide consistency and fairness to all individuals, public comments will be heard in accordance with public board policy BED local and procedures outlined in Administrative Regulation BED. The board strongly discourages inappropriate comments on individual personnel or students in public session. Complaints or concerns will be considered by the board only after the complaint has followed the guidelines prescribed by the applicable policies such as DGBA local, FNG local, and GF local. Public comments will be limited to individuals who signed up to participate in the public comments portion of the meeting before the board meeting is called to order. Any individual who signs up to participate in the public comment portion of the meeting may not relinquish their time to another individual. No public comment shall exceed 3 minutes. To ensure compliance with the time limitations, a yellow card will be held up by the board secretary at 2 minutes, and a red card will be held up at 3 minutes. First of all, tonight we have Ms. Catherine Barton.
So, Catherine, yeah, you'll come here and speak in, and you'll need to stand here so you can be on
Okay,
TV.
thank
Okay?
you.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Barden. I'm a teacher here at SCUC. When we tell you that the money is there for raises, that we must trim the fat, and we don't want unnecessary training or the expense of that training, bringing in outside contractors is exactly what we mean. We should not be outsourcing anything in this district, especially if we already have a deficit. I looked at the PEMS data from the school year 21 to 22. SCUC increased its budget for curriculum and staff development, also known as Function 13, by over 22%. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and central office is asking for more money in 22-23. Why? Instructional coaching is something SCUC already knows how to do. Campus administrators, curriculum coordinators, and our seasoned teachers know how to do this. Why are we spending money on contractors to teach us things we already know? Central office is way off base with what teachers and support staff need and want. We are begging you to listen to us. We need our facilitators to free our campus administrators to get into our classrooms. I want an administrator who knows our school culture and my classroom climate to provide feedback. A contract person giving feedback means nothing. You were correct when you said, let's ask the teachers at the Title I campuses what they think. Ask them or anyone who has worked on campuses with instructional coaches. Everything Central wants from outside instructional coaches, we already do. Spending more money on consultants is not an investment in teachers. This will not help teachers. A substantial raise, a decent retention payment, and decreased benefits costs are investments in teachers. Central office is trying to excuse and explain themselves by drowning those asking the hard questions in math in complex explanations. Well, we teach math, and we understand taxation, jurisdiction, types of bonds, and limitations on what and where we can spend. We're the ones that have to explain this constantly to students and parents when they complain about being charged for a third ketchup or a pack of plasticware, and why we don't have Chromebooks in every classroom. None of our district money issues are new information. We all knew this. So why wasn't there a plan for this? Y'all had over 8 years to figure this out. SCUC is not being fiscally transparent. Our 23-23 budget is inaccessible. Our coaches' stipends are not made public, which is required by law. Our district spends almost $1 million on consultants to do the work central office should be doing. In summary, teachers and support staff are asking us to let us see the budget before we are locked into our contracts on June 27th. We deserve a better raise than 1.5%, which is lower than the minimum 2% recommended by the Texas Association of School Boards. We also must get decreased health benefits. Respectfully submitted, 564 teachers and support staff, which is a 32 response rate representing all 17 campuses. What more do we have to do to get your attention and for you to listen and believe us?
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Next, Carol Davis.
I apologize for my casual attire. Actually, no, I don't. It's my first day off in 20 plus days because I have to have a second job to pay the bills. But this is my main employer and I shouldn't have to have a second job. The cost of living is not being taken care of by this district, which used to be one of the highest paying districts in the region. We're not even close anymore. We've not only been beat, we're not even in the conversation anymore. My family's had to do a hard budget dive. Has this district done that? Why is this district outsourcing? I repeat what Catherine has said. Question, teachers at the secondary level, both at the junior high and the high school, all teach, plan, grade, make parental contacts, make daily adjustments on the fly for over 100 plus students a day. We don't have an assistant. How many assistants sit in this room? At the district level, are they taking the amount of work home that we are to make sure that we're ready for the next day? Because that's the on-the-fly adjustments that we have to do because we had to teach the day before, we have to adjust for the next day. Has the board done a line-by-line budget analysis? I know my family had to. Are we going beyond the grouped budget analysis? Are we truly looking at where the money is going? How much money did we spend on the facility to do convocation? Because I can tell you as a classroom teacher, I would have preferred time in my classroom, and it's not in the budget for me to have the mileage to drive over there this year. I literally don't have the gas money to go. As a taxpayer, I formally submit an open records request for a line-by-line item budget analysis for this district for last year and the proposed upcoming budget. Finally, the board has discussed options it will have to take in order to figure out what we need to do. Because you've got teachers that will not be able to get to work with the proposed budget. 1.5%, because I sit at the top of that middle grade, I actually take a pay cut. There are teachers behind me that sit with that many years of experience. We take a pay cut with only 1.5%. I can't only speak for myself, but I know the teachers behind me well. I didn't get into this for the money. I got into it for the kids. But I shouldn't be having to let my family suffer because I can't pay the bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And the next item, we're going to go into a board workshop and presented by Dr. Ely and Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We have our June board workshop here on the 22-23 budget. We'll go over a lot of information tonight. We will start with where we are on our current budget with our projected end of year projections based on the end of April. So we'll let you know kind of where we are here. We'll look at our updated budget projections for next year, including a deeper dive into compensation. And then we're going to have a first conversation about interest in sinking or debt service and some options available for us. So just want to, before I kick it over to Mr. Moy, just want to recognize Mona Schuster and Tommy Molina. Where's Tommy? He's at the copy machine. Okay, great. Just getting stuff prepared for you, so you'll have a hard copy there with you as well. And so with that, Mr. Moy, take it away.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ely, Mr. Finley, members of the board, and GLT. We are at our third budget workshop for the 22-23 year. Just go back, remind you, April was more of a high level, just school finance and general overview. Last month, we did our first real look at the general fund. We're going to stick mainly with the general fund again tonight with the updated projections, but as Dr. Ely alluded to, for the first time this budget cycle, we will talk about the debt service fund. There are 3 funds the board must adopt a budget for: general, debt service, child nutrition. Child nutrition will have its deep dive at the July budget workshop. So where are we in terms of our 21-22 budget year? So right now, we are showing in total, we'll have about $135.8 million in revenue, which is significantly higher than the budget as of right now. Things that were unexpected at the time the budget was created was an item. We had a fairly large property value audit settle up for the 2020 tax year, and it takes a while for the attorneys to work with the comptroller's office to show that the property values since certification actually went down. So when property values go down, state aid must go up, and they are able to go back and retroactively apply a lower property value into the formulas and catch us up for the funds that we should have been due in 2020, 2021. That we thought wasn't going to get settled up until the next fiscal year. Tonight it is in these projections because now we believe we will have the funds in hand by the end of June. And then a couple of other things that we mentioned at a couple of other meetings. Some of the changes that were made, some in the regular session, some in the special. They added a new replacement to the formerly killed GT allotment. We got a little more ADSY money for attendance for K-5 in summer learning than we were expecting. And of course, the legislature changed how they funded career and technical education courses, and that was a positive impact to that allocation.
What was ADSY again?
Additional day school year. So you get funding for up to a half-day ADA for any K-5 student up to 30 additional days, whether you do them during an intersession or during the summer.
30 additional days after the 180. So, and we do that with our summer learning.
20. And we did 20.
We did 20.
All right, on the expenditure side, we are looking to, we have a forecast right now of spending $136.9 million. That is $3.9 million less than the budget, with the obvious largest variance being in personnel. That is truly reflective of the unprecedented amount of vacancies that we had throughout the year. So normally you can apply, 1.5% of your budget of your payroll budget won't get spent, because not every position can be filled every day of the year. That's just not feasible. But we also know that we had many, many other vacancies. We had a hard time filling some teaching positions. We had a whole bunch of custodian positions that were vacant throughout the year. So that's where you get the difference, where we're not spending the entirety of the adopted payroll budget. Under contracted services, a little bit less than budget, about $500,000. Mainly that is in a shift to doing more internal professional development and not relying on regional service centers to provide those trainings. In other operating, the $640,000 change or difference from budget, that is mainly in student and employee travel. The budget was based on a return, quote unquote, return to normal, to where there would be more student travel, there would be more teachers and staff going to courses, conventions, such and such, and when Delta hit and then Omicron hit, and a lot of places said, we're just keeping our big conventions even virtual and not doing in-person travel, so that cut down on a lot of the expenses. surplus. We budgeted a little bit more than some of our bids actually came in on some of our property casualty and vehicle insurance. So there's a little bit of savings there. Okay, so this is a little complicated. I'll try and walk you through it. In general, we had, at this point with the assigned fund balance projects, that we were going to have a deficit budget of about $7.6 million. We are now forecasting 1.1 million. That's a difference of 6.4. So when you take the slide showing the revenue differences and the slide on the expenditure differences, those are both positive, favorable variances. So compared to the budget that's in place right now, we anticipate being $6.4 million better than that. And if you come down here to the smaller print, I'm trying to break up of this 7.5 of the loss, 3.3 of it was intentional spending down of fund balance for the assigned fund balance projects that were between technology and maintenance. And so we had budgeted that just normal operations would be a deficit of 4.2. It actually came in at probably now a surplus of 2.1. And remaining fund balance, a total of just a hair under $50 million, of which 14 is assigned and 35 is unassigned. We're now saying because of these variances up here, the 6.4 million, fund balance will be 56 million, 14 assigned, 42 unassigned.
Can we pause right there for a second?
Yes.
We're layering in the assigned and unassigned. Everybody remembers what we're doing with that, and there are a lot of numbers up there. Anybody have any questions on that before we move on? Fund balance. Thanks.
Okay, so again, just like we've shown past couple of meetings, there is a trend that we've been showing where we have been adding back to fund balance the last few years. Now, granted, 2018-19, the $2 million add fund balance, that is what we would call, quote unquote, the last normal year. Starting with 1920, we shut down at spring break, and then there was some hold harmless revenue from the state, and we just, the last few months of the year, we just did not spend. We weren't even here. And then 2020-21, we added about $5 million to fund balance. Again, I mean, there was some return, there was some virtual, it was a back and forth, but we just simply did not do as much spending as what was in the budget. And there was a lot of additional, if I'm not mistaken, COVID specific funds that ended up, we didn't use as much, like PPE. We had a lot of PPE donated, so we didn't go out and buy that PPE, stuff like that. And so here we are with this year, again, with 14 million in assigned fund balance that we think we're gonna end the year with, 42 million unassigned. Total fund balance, we have 158 days worth of operations in fund balance. A question was asked, if revenue were to stop today, how many days could the district survive? The answer is 158. And if we don't do any more assigned fund balance projects, because the unassigned is 118 days.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
It kind of pertains to these number of days. I know the federal government every once in a while does this whole, we're shutting down, we're not paying anybody anything, and that's happened in the past. Has Texas ever done anything like that? Where they're like, we're not.
Not
No.
since I can remember.
Okay, no, I just
No.
know that the federal government, there have been periods of time where they don't pay people.
I know there was a period of jostling where there were some capital staffers that didn't get paid, but that's so tiny. It doesn't affect, like, it wouldn't affect.
Right, no,
business account.
and I think the whole idea of this fund balance, the days that we have is, by law, we have to have X amount of days in case something happens, and that's why we have this.
Yeah, there's not a specific number of days or months in law, but there are recommendations, and then we actually get graded on our fund balance with the financial integrity rating system of Texas Schools First. and they do a measure of what they would consider, I guess, a healthy fund balance. And I know we will, with this amount, we will pass that measure.
And they have two different indicators. One is 90 days, and then one is 60 days. So 2 months and 3 months are the two metrics in there.
Right, and what we have here is not an exorbitant amount of fund balance. It's not, I came from a district where when I started, it was about 50 days, and we built it up to about this level, but it was a struggle to get there, so this is a good amount. It also makes a huge difference with Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, who rate our debt. It tells the world how creditworthy we are. And even though the INS, tells us how creditworthy our bonds are, even though that is its own separate fund, the credit agencies look at us as a whole. So they do assess how we manage our operating funds as well as our debt funds.
And this board in the past has set a local policy with a target of 90 days for both M&O and the debt service budget.
That's going to wrap up our talking about this year. Now let's move into talking about 22-23, starting, of course, with revenue. The revenue numbers that you see tonight will be based on a 99.5% tax collection rate. From our history, that is a very achievable rate. It rarely, I don't believe in the last 7-8 years, I ever saw it drop below 99. A lot of people thought when COVID hit and the economy crashed, people weren't going to pay their taxes. That's just not true. It is based on a 16% taxable assessed value increase. We went in a lot of detail last month in terms of, well, everyone talked about the 2.5% growth in M&O taxes and that you were locked there. And then we discovered, wow, no, we hit the TEA's floor of how low your M&O rate can go in any given year. So we're going to be allowed to grow M&O a little bit more, but all that does is lower your state payments by that amount.
What you're saying, that's like it's being targeted revenue.
It's basically back to targeted revenue, correct. And then within the foundation school program, we've talked about this before, we're showing just under a 1% enrollment increase. We really need to know what's going to be the effect of the new charter and how many kids are comfortable coming back to school. A slight increase over this year in the amount of actual daily attendance. And of course, we always see that our SPED FTEs continue to go up and up and up and up. So here are the numbers that we showed last month, 138 million total revenue. Now that is up to 140.4 million. So you see between these two, so that is a difference of about 2.4 million from where we were at the last budget workshop. What has changed? I have tweaked the property value growth up a little after I was able to do a little bit more analysis of loss history from April estimates to July certified, and then balanced in a lot of what is increasing our property value is new growth, and that usually does not get affected by the same amount of protests as a reappraisal of an existing property. So I went from roughly 13.5% growth last month to about 16, a little change. But again, it just increases one bucket, decreases the amount of money in another bucket. That's what it shows here. So our higher growth lowers FSP. Now, I said I raised the attendance rate. I raised it compared to where we are this year, but I actually have decreased the attendance rate from what I showed last month. Last month, in the numbers that you saw, I was a little more aggressive in terms of bringing attendance rates closer to pre-COVID levels. We talked it over. We want to be a little more conservative than that, and hopefully the rates do come up. So I'm sort of went from where I was super aggressive, almost near pre-COVID levels last month, to about halfway between where we are now and pre-COVID levels. So kind of splitting the difference.
So, Mr. Moy, a number of districts are trying to figure out what attendance rates are going to look like in this post-COVID era. So for this district, if you take just the attendance rates from, say, spring break on for the last half of this year, what are they usually, and what were they this year? Did we drop 1%, 2%, 3 percentage points?
Compared to pre-COVID, we dropped about, you're just talking the last 6 weeks.
I'm just talking just in general, just
Okay,
if we forecast with Omicron being gone and kind of with not any variant around,
Right.
we just look at these last 3 months or so, how does that look compared to just what we saw in 18-19? You know, what we usually used to see.
So in this last post-Omicron period, we were looking anywhere between 0.75% to maybe 1.25%, depending on certain days, less than pre-COVID, but much better than during Delta and Omicron. So if you take the entirety, the entire year as a whole, we probably dropped just a shade below 92%, where we were showing above 94% pre-COVID. So that's why I'm kind of splitting the difference now between the 93.5 and 93.7 level for right now. And we'll see if we get back to a full year of our numbers being in the high 93s to up to 94. There were days this year where we did hit the 94. It was never consistent this year, though. It seemed like a lot of people, there was, certain Fridays, it just was slightly lower than a normal. And again, I think we talked about this before. Yes, I would love to have the revenue, but until we know everything is gone, we also don't want parents sending their kids to school sick to get somebody else sick, because then you're going to have multiple absences.
So in the past, we built it on 95, 96, didn't we, or no?
Okay, so that's mea culpa. My model traces those average dailies, but compares it to snapshot enrollment, because in 20 years, I've seen there's a very consistent relationship between those numbers. So yes, we're at 95, but sometimes enrollment dips. So we're at 95 of a lower number of kids. So just saying it's going to be 95 doesn't help me, because those kids don't count for ADA. If we're doing, we lose 200 kids, I'm still missing those 200 in revenue.
Right, and we won't know until probably August, September with the new charter, how that will play into our numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, we won't really know about, the official numbers from the charter till after spring break, when TEA releases the reports, but we will be able to see if any of our campuses saw a significant dip from where we were projecting them to be. Okay, so here's the thing we talked about. Local revenue going up about, a little over $1 million, but this big number down here, state foundation, going from 55 million to about 53 million. Part of that is the increase in property taxes. Part of that is my being less aggressive on attendance rates. We do now have an estimate for what our hold harmless is going to be. The state is going to hold us harmless for our low attendance for the first 4 6-week attendance periods of this year. Attendance is broken up into 6 6-week periods. So what the state is going to do is they're going to compare period 1 of this year to period 1 of 1920 before COVID. And if the rate of attendance was higher in 1920, they're gonna fudge our ADA up to meet that rate times the number of enrolled students. Same for period 2, 3, and 4. And right now, we think that that will be a benefit to us of about 2.3 million. It will not get processed by TEA until the next fiscal year. So for right now, we are having that in as next year's money, even though it's a hold harmless for this year. It's when are we gonna actually gonna get that realized? Likely in fiscal 23.
So under URI remediation, is that going to remain zero?
That is,
I know, sorry.
No, it's a good
no,
question.
They don't know what our electric bill
okay, so
was.
that was that's a $750, maybe $1,000 question, but we have it at zero because the state keeps, long ago, when we had the winter storm, we tracked the increased cost of utilities separately. We could track, this was because of, paying GVEC and everything else after URI. The state said, don't worry, we've got all this federal money to us, we're gonna pass it on to you, turn in your bills. Then they said, oh, well, we're gonna give districts a whole nother year to collect all their data. And even then, they haven't told us how much the entire pot of money is, but they did tell us that whatever that pot is, it's gonna get prorated based on who turned in claims. So we don't know how much the pot is and how much the proration rate is. So for right now, I've got nothing in the budget for that until we get more information. It could be $20,000, it could be $200,000. We just don't know.
Thank you.
Moving on to the appropriations. In May, we showed you total draft of the budget of $144.2 million of appropriations. Now, we're showing 146.3. So that is a difference of about 2.1 million. So what has changed since the May workshop? Since then, I've been able to get a much better handle on the way that our systems process vacancies and payroll, and work to do a better analysis of how much should be in the budget for positions we're budgeting for but don't have a warm body in. So I was able to tighten that number up some. We changed the general pay increase from 1.5% that was shown in May to 2% tonight. You'll get more detail on that in a little bit. And we changed our health insurance increase from 10% to 18%. We had our initial meeting with our health insurance consultants, and they are showing, so they stagger, the annual rates of inflation for medical and pharma. And, we haven't really changed internal or our district share or employee share for several years. So they're saying, unless you want to do some plan change options, you're really going to need to go up, a lot more than 10%. So right now, we're bringing in 18%. We are still awaiting some proposals from the consultant to say, here, if you change this, you could save some money. If you went to this, type of plan, you could save some money here. If you went to this type of pre-approval for pharma, you can save some money here. But for right now, I'm just leaving this placeholder of going from 450,000 to 800,000 on the health plan increase.
That's our contribution, not the employee
That's
contribution.
our contribution going up $800,000.
And what percent of that do you pay?
So right now, it is about a 62-38 split with us doing the 62. And depending on how we break this out, if we can get some plan change savings, if we can pass that on to the employee and then maybe bump up again, even a little more than this, the employer share, we're certainly going to look at that and try to keep the change to employee premiums to, I don't want to say low, because it's, when I look at my paycheck, I'm not going to say it's low. But considering we haven't gone up at all in 4 years, that's really a 3 to 4% increase each year to get you, that would get you to 17, 18% after 4 years. We've just done 0, 0, 0, 0, 08, 18. You know, so that's where we're standing right now.
So we're gonna try to hold a 6238 margin, or?
No, we don't know about the margins. What Mr. Moy's saying is we're gonna work with our folks that help us out on this and try to see what we can add. We've already added a significant amount in there, seeing if there's some plan changes or other ways that we could do this to lower it and then pass that savings on to the employees and having that be less than what we're doing. So if we're able to do that, then yes, our proportion would rise in that.
That's what-
Yeah. We don't have an arbitrary 60, 40, 70, 30 or anything there.
I don't have that yet.
No, we're just trying to, we're doing what we can on that.
Right. Changes to supplies and materials, since the numbers you saw in May, we are adding about $200,000 for increased maintenance, custodial parts and supplies. They're just between years of adding square footage plus inflation. You know, JD's done as much as he can with, you know, shop towels and hot water, but we really need to try and bump up that operation a little bit. Some of it, though, has been offset by, well, we've been cleaning with some, you know, we've been doing deep cleanings. We've been using COVID-related stuff, and some of that is, you know, reimbursement or even donated, but we're gonna get to the point where we just got to clean, period, and the costs have just gone way up. Other operating, we talked about not doing, you know, travel this year. In May, I made the assumption, and maybe I shouldn't, that we were gonna stay at an extremely low level of travel, but I would hope that with no new variants, that there would be some return to normalcy, and a little bit more increase in student travel, a little more increase in employee travel to go get the good PD that they can't get through their laptop screen. And we know that with the cost of fuel and everything else going up, that whatever travel they do have is going to be more expensive than pre-COVID. We also know that we're having an increase to other lines of insurance. As property values grow, the cost for insurance to replace a building goes up. And so we were factoring in a small increase in PNC, and our insurance company said, you really need to have a larger premium due to the fact that if something catastrophic were to happen to one of your campuses, it's going to cost us this much more than 2 years ago to rebuild a building. So here you can see a little bit down on the base where I was able to squeeze some numbers, an extra amount in compensation increase, health insurance going to 800, and bringing this back to the 21-22 budget level as opposed to there. It may not all come to fruition, but you know, if it doesn't, it just is a return to fund balance. Okay, in May, we brought you a 1.5 general pay increase and just kept it at a very high level. This breaks it down for you on what a 1.5% pay increase is for teachers, librarians, and that should be teachers, librarians, nurses, because we are bringing those back to one scale. And then other administrators and professionals, paraprofessional, clerical, and auxiliary. So a 1.5% pay increase is about $1.5 million. This does not include any effect to the Child Nutrition Services Fund. Remember, we're just focusing on general fund tonight. When we come in July, you'll see the effect of a pay increase to Ms. Cornejo's fund.
And this is not the market adjustments, which will come on the next slide.
This does not include any of the market adjustments, correct. And then we move out to what it would cost for a 2% and a 2.5. In general, every 0.5% of a GPI is $500,000.
Does that include our portion of TRS?
Yes. Which is the strange way they do TRS. It's a much more costly. We have to pay all of the increased TRS on teachers, but not on a lot of other employees. Don't ask me why. And you'll notice that for 2 and 2.5%, as of right now, it assumes that district leadership stays at a 1.5% increase, will not go to 2 if the board decides 2, or 2.5 if the board decides 2.5 at this point. So that's approximately 65 to 70 employees who will, if the board decides 1.5 will be a 1.5, but anything above that, we are proposing stay at 1.5. It's not a lot of money, but we are proposing it. All right, we showed you the market adjustments, scale adjustments last month, and it's been tweaked a little. We had shown you it was a little, right around $1 million, with half of it being to our lowest paid employees, being paraprofessional, clerical, and auxiliary, and that's a little, it was a little not the entire picture, because we decided to make a bigger adjustment to custodial, and the numbers that we showed you last month were increasing the salaries for those employees by X amount, net the fact that we are actually proposing to reduce the budget for some custodial FTEs. Mr. Mosley brought this to ELT and says, if I can get this many custodians at a higher rate, because even the rate that was proposed by TASB, we're worried won't be, competitive with Judson. So what if we bring the scale up even more than what TASB said, but I can kind of offset part of that increased cost by asking for fewer total positions. So we were at, I believe, 138 custodial allocations. Now that would probably go down to just a little bit below 130, somewhere between 125 and 130 to help offset. But if we were able to get 125 custodians hired and in place, that would be amazing.
How many do we have right now?
We're 42 positions down right now.
We're budgeted for 100 and how many?
138. 38.
So we have 96 in-house. We actually need 42 more to go to full staffing.
Yes, sir.
I know the teachers have been talked about having to do their own cleaning and stuff like that, so that's
Absolutely.
obviously why.
Yep.
We just simply can't hire them, they're not available.
There's not even names in the system. So if you separate then the market adjustments from the positions adjustment, you can see then that this number of the market and scale adjustments is actually much bigger. It's 900,000 out of 1.2 million. So the TASB study shined a light on us versus our peer districts. And in the teacher librarian category, there just weren't that many areas where they said you are X% out of line with the districts that they compared us to, where in our lower paid employees, if you looked at they had the center line of here's the market, to the right you're paying above market, to the left you're paying below market. Custodial, child nutrition, clerical, instructional assistants were all to the left. We were just under market. So we are taking TASB's recommendations to bring our employees up to what TASB has researched to be within, within plus or minus of that market range that they did, that they surveyed. They surveyed lots of districts. When TASB asks for information, almost everyone responds.
That's trailing data at this point, right?
Of course. So that we conducted this in the spring So yes, if anyone has announced, then we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do this, yes, it's lagging. It was the best data available at the time of the study. And I brought this to you last month, and I just wanted to point out one change that wasn't in there. We have decided to do the same thing with child nutrition workers that we did with custodial, bring them up to $13.50 with a midpoint of $15.60. Again, none of that cost is in the slides that you showed because that's all in their own fund. We will bring that in July. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. All right, so shows us where we're gonna end 21-22, shows us at this point where we are with 22-23. So what does that mean going long-term? And break out your bifocals. So you can see here, here's that 1.1 million deficit for this year. The numbers proposed tonight that we went to and compared to May is a deficit of about 5.9. That's about 200,000, 250 less of a deficit than we brought you last month. So it's a little bit closer to break even, not a lot, but considering we did a lot of adds to the budget, I'm happy that we've actually brought you a deficit that's a little lower. But when you add funds to something that is ongoing, you don't just feel a pay raise in 22-23. That pay raise also happens in 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26.
Same thing with additional staff.
Same thing with adding, yes, same thing with adding staff. So we went through, you know, all, Ms. Cannon at the regular board meeting went through with you all the staff that we're adding. A few of them are American Rescue Plan staffing, some of them are ESSER staffing, but the vast majority was staffing that we're adding to the general fund. So that plus, so that new staffing here is showing at about $1.4 million. That was 1.35, that's what, it's about what Ms. Cannon had the last month. And so if we just do a couple of small assumptions moving forward, top line, average daily attendance, just slightly increasing it just as we're anticipating a slight increase for this year. And then we don't do a whole lot else with revenue because not a lot of these change dramatically over the years. There's actually a slight decrease in total revenue from 2023 to 2024 because some of these items in here were like big catch-ups. Or the hold harmless for 21-22, that's actually coming a year late. So that's the only reason why this is showing, even though we're adding students, that we're having slightly less revenue. But then you see the trend go up where we're getting about a net 700,000 new revenue each year based on enrollment and attendance trends.
What you're saying up there is that one line that says state hold harmless for 2021-22 that only has something in it for next year. There's not anything coming after that.
It is a one-time
It's a
payment.
one-time infusion of $2.3 million.
Correct, and you know, the TEA was even hesitant to do a hold harmless for this year. And so unless we have another multi-wave hit us for horrendous attendance, that's it. Whatever kids show up, we're on our own. That's what we're getting paid for. We're not going to get money that says, well, you're running historically 1.5% below where you were pre-COVID, so we're going to adjust you up 1.5%. No, TEA is going to switch back to however many kids come to school, that's how many we're paying you on.
My math is correct. With that 2.3, the deficit would actually be close to 8.2. Is that right?
Which, I'm sorry, sir, which?
If you take away the hold harmless from 22-23.
Oh, yes, sir.
The deficit would be actually closer to 8.2.
Yes, sir.
Starting out. And it may come down as the year wears on, but that's what you're projecting now.
Yes, sir.
Brian, could you, I didn't understand what your comment on if it happens this year, then what happens the next year regarding, I guess, raises?
No.
What
Oh,
was it?
you mean if it raised? So if like we were using assigned fund balance to do some major projects, if Dr. Burkholder spent $3 million on infrastructure and technology this year, and we decide not to do it next year, we get that choice, it's done. But if we hire someone, unless we decide to fire them next year, it's an ongoing cost.
Yes.
So there's no, well, we're gonna put this in for fiscal year 22-23, and then say, school districts aren't in the business of hiring a bunch of people and then a year later saying, no, sorry, we made a mistake, you're all gone.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. I'm gonna back that one out.
About doing that, whatever happens, the federal government comes along, gives us funds, and then we roll it in the contract, like special ed 3 years ago. Then we had to put in the contract, if the funds don't get reinitiated, then we have to let those positions go. Unless we fund them ourselves.
And some of those positions, especially in special education, with using the ARP funds, where there'll be grant funded, we call them grant funded positions.
And I know you mentioned this earlier, but I really think it plays out here in this chart that you have up here. If you look under local property tax, for 2021 to 2022 was at 60 million. And with everyone's increase in their rates of their homes, everyone thought the school district was getting boatloads more money, but that's not true. If you look at what actually the property tax is going to generate, it's 66 million. And interestingly enough, it's actually not an increase, because if you look at down at STEP Foundation Fund, we were at 57 million last year, and it's going to go down 52 because we went up in local property taxes.
Correct, and the only reason, so it goes from 60 to 66, that's a $6 million increase in property taxes. The only reason it is not exactly $6 million reduction to foundation school fund is because we are projecting a slight enrollment increase, a slight attendance increase, and additional special ed FTEs, which generate a little more money per child than quote-unquote regular ed.
So we get more locally, and the state takes more away.
Yes. Yes. What people didn't really get is we didn't get a chance to completely unpack House Bill 3 before COVID hit and changed our focus to something completely different. TEA had not finished really writing rules on how House Bill 3 was going to be implemented. They were still in that process when we all went home. And so we have then been consumed by a pandemic for 2 years, and people are now just going, wait a minute, without a hold harmless, my state revenues go down? Yes, because that's the way the state designed it.
Yeah, if you look at the local property tax and look at the state fund, foundation school fund, the percentage of local taxes funding school districts is going to just jump.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right now you look at 60 versus 57, that's about what, 53%? And then if you look at the out years, it's close to 67%.
And so for the property wealthy districts, of which we are not, we're not property poor, but we're pretty average on that. But property wealthy districts, there's going to be a lot more of them, which means a lot more local revenue is going to be recaptured back to the state. It's going to kind of really reset that.
Yeah, so last month I had a chart up there that said, what if the SCUC student body, with all of their demographics and all of their instructional settings, were placed in a property wealthy district like Edgewood? Well, the split would have been 80-20 state. And then if all of our 16,000 students, with all of our demographics and all of our different instructional settings, were in the district that I just came from, it would have been 85-15 local.
We're about 50.
Yeah, we're about 50-50 this year.
That's going to change in the out years.
It will. Now, I will say, because it's not as big of a deal, because they're always going to keep us flat, but the way that this model that one of the models that every school district uses, either uses as their primary or uses to check their own figures, has an amount in there for how much the entire property value of the state's going up, and that affects your compression rate. They're using 4.4%. I think the state property value went up more than 4.4%. So we're gonna see a much more dramatic push by the legislature in '23 to accelerate the compression down because the property values are going up so much. So you're gonna see these numbers that are going up in local property tax. By the time, you know, Memorial Day of '23 comes around, these property tax collection numbers won't be going up as high as I'm showing here because the state will be forcing the rate even more down. But they're gonna have enough money in the coffers to make it up on the state side. When you think about oil and gas tax, sales tax has not gone down yet, despite inflation. If nothing else, it's an ad valorem tax. So when your cost of it goes up, the cost of the sales tax goes up. So the state is actually pulling in much more money, and they're gonna use it to buy down property taxes again.
I think the key thing for us to remember is we get an amount. That amount is determined by the number of students that we have and how often they come to school. And what percentage is made up of local taxes or state aid varies based on property tax collections in the school district. The key thing is what you said, Mr. Vice President, early on, was we're back to targeted revenue, which was 2 funding systems ago. Just basically you get a set amount per child, and the only way to get more is to get more children. Or in this kind of a post-COVID environment here, for them to go to school more often. We're still trying to, as we said, figure that out and make valid projections on how often kids are gonna come to school. That truly is, so if we're in a system where we're having gradual growth, it's better than no growth or decline. So hear me well. But it's still tough because we have rising needs. We have rising needs to take care of our staff. We have rising healthcare needs, and just the other things we have as well are rising at greater than 0.9%.
I think also what's important too, we've talked about it before, HB3, and how what we get for a student is very different from our neighbors for various reasons. That little calculator that's used by TEA or the state or whoever doesn't punch out the same numbers for every district. And so I think just for us, we're working with probably, in my opinion, a lot less than, not a lot less, but in many cases, a lot less than other districts around us.
Yes, compared to some of the districts around us, we have, although we have a much, not much, but we have a higher percentage of our students in a special education setting. That brings in more money, but we spend well more than our allotment in special education. What we don't get is a lot of money in compensatory education because we do not have a very high eco-dis rate in this district.
Percentage of students on free and reduced lunch.
Right, and to be Title I, that's at what, 40%?
To be Title I school-wide services is 40%.
So which of our schools are Title I?
We have Wilder, Schertz, yeah, Rose Garden.
Rose Garden, okay. So everyone else is less than that 40%?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe around about, what, 30% district-wide?
Well, the last number we had, we were 29% district-wide. The state average is 60.
All right, so looking at this just from revenue to expenditures, what does it look like? What does it mean then for fund balance? Now, to be fair, these are budgets. As I said, we will never have a 100% fill rate on all of our positions. Not every dollar that is allocated to a campus or department is going to be spent, so there will be some amount that these deficits aren't going to be this big when it comes to actuals at the end of the year. But this gives you just some perspective of what would happen if we did get to a point where we actually had an actual structural deficit, where we can't prove that we will, at the end of the year, have as much or more money coming in as we have going out. Bringing down these fund balance levels from the 40s to the 20s. It will probably take obviously longer than this because like I said, we don't spend every dollar that we put in the budget, but it won't extend many years beyond this chart.
Shmuel, can you kind of walk us through this? There's lots of stuff up there, and I know that we're as familiar with looking at this portion of the template.
Sure. So the top 3 lines is a summary total of all the detail from this slide. It just takes in the middle where you see here total revenue, total appropriations, and then is it a surplus or deficiency? Then this shows your change to fund balance in total. So if we were to actually have a $5.9 million deficit next year, fund balance would be brought down to $50.2 million. Then we have the assignments of fund balance, where we say it is prudent to make sure you have enough in fund balance to at least cover 1 year of an additional deficit. So it's pulling in our projection from 23-24. Then we have, this should actually say non-spendable instead of assigned. I know that was one of the questions we brought through in the transmittal. We're asking about what is examples of different categories of fund balance. You can't spend your inventory. It's not liquid. And then here are the 2 assignments. This will continue on with Dr. Burkholder's technology infrastructure improvements. And then this is for the maintenance projects. So this means that the unassigned fund balance, the not spoken for fund balance, is down to 36 million. And you compare that to the school's first thresholds. Even if we were to lose the 5.9, we're even above the 90 days still. But then we go below 90, still above 60 in 23-24. And we're again below 90 days, but barely above 60 days in 24-25. And then we almost get to the 60 days in 25-26. Yes, sir.
Well, so the long and short of it is, it's a spiral. Unless we find some way to change some things. And I had a question, so in 23-24, which is just a year away, will we be in non-compliance with our 90-day CE local rule that it sounds like the board agreed to keep it above 90?
Correct.
Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Well, yeah, yes and no. Well, I guess the answer is perhaps. As Brian was explaining, is that we budget, these are budget numbers, so we budget for 100% of the positions 100% of the time. We know, having gone through this for a number of years, that on the 6100s, the personnel, we will not spend 100% of that. So what we're showing you there is the all-in number, and we know that if we do a budget deficit here of 5.896 million, we know for sure, well, all things being equal on the revenue side up top, that we won't spend that, and so it'll be less than that. So we really won't go down 5.9 million. We'll go down less, and we really won't go down 7.6. We'll go down less, and so the lines will look like this, but as we go through time, they'll kind of look like that.
So if we watch it like a hawk, and we're careful, it won't be as extreme as this looks.
Correct.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
But we can't figure out where we're not going to have this, right?
Right.
We have to budget
We're
all
gonna
that.
be nimble.
Yeah.
So yes, if we were to somehow spend every dollar we budgeted, this would, by 24, we would be below the target that's in CE local. If I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a target,
It's a
not
target.
mandate.
It's a mandate.
So then we can
Oh.
create an action plan if we think we're getting to not be there to say this is how we're going to ensure that we stay above.
That 90 days is for not only the 199 budget, but for the debt service budget, and we have not hit 25% for a while. I think we're close to that now.
Yeah, it's not on a specific slide when we get to the debt service, but at the end of this year, we will be at our target fund balance in the debt service fund.
I appreciate the conservative way it's being approached, because this will keep it high in our minds and acute in our decision-making.
I would love to say 23-24 budget, projected actual, there's just not enough columns, it's small enough the way it is.
That's in a crystal ball either.
That's true.
And I guess I just wanted to point out again for the assigned fund balance that we have up there, assigned for technology and assigned for maintenance, you see they get smaller every year. Because what we do during those particular years is based on the plan that we have put forward to the board approved, that will take that amount out of unassigned, assigned and put it in unassigned and spend it to do the maintenance that we need to. So those just keep getting smaller until we get to 25, 26, and there's nothing left out of those because we spent that.
So this budget also assumes the current schools that we have, right? Because we are looking in the future at another school possibly. Is that correct?
At some point, if we continue to grow, and all indications are we are going to eventually be bigger than we are today,
Right.
we would need additional campuses. The place that we have the greatest need now, the critical path, is junior high.
Right.
Because we have the two large ones. We have plenty of capacity right now at the two high schools based on what they're built for. We have 8 elementary schools. And while they are growing, and some are, so folks, our friends at Rose Garden, it's really growing down there. So it is growing there, but we also have some of the other charter schools, which traditionally younger kids go to charter schools, and quite often they come back to traditional public schools as they get a little bit older and have, as the public schools have more programs.
Right. And
So
I know
we're pretty good on most of our schools. I guess those were very long-winded to say. But the critical path is junior high at some point we're going to have to look at.
But, and what I'm getting at is with the junior high, we now have a new electric bill, and we have new custodians, and we have new employees, we have more, and so I'm just kind of wondering, was that a consideration in years 2025 or so and on?
Not yet, but there's a decent formula that we know that, because when you open a new school, you change boundaries on the 2 schools that it's relieving. So the main focus, you actually just become a small amount less efficient when it comes to student teachers. So you're not adding, you may add a couple of teachers here and there due to not them being at 3 different buildings instead of 2 different buildings. And then of course you have the fixed cost of a principal AP, but when we think that we have an idea of when, it's going to be multiple years down the road after a bond passes. That starts to trigger for us to say, what year do we put those operational costs in? And right now, we're not even in discussions of a bond package that would include a junior high. So no, they're not in these numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion before we, well, actually I have a couple more things to show to kind of layer on to these last 2 slides, which ended up,
I was just wondering, you had briefly discussed some type of limited open enrollment. Is that, what are the parameters for that, and when will we consider doing that? How would we know when?
I think that was brought up as a question.
Yeah, it was
I
like
wouldn't
at
say
the
that we've
last-
discussed it formally as
At
a
the last
district.
budget meeting.
So what limited open enrollment is, would allow non-resident students who reside in another district to come to school here in SCUC. It is a financial benefit for us in the sense that we get that targeted revenue number. We get the $6,160 in basic allotment for each, and then the other weighted funds that are on top of that. So there are some advantages from a financial aspect of educating non-resident students in the district. And I think if the board were wanting to go in that particular direction, we'd want to be very smart about that because we couldn't just wildly open it. as we talked about earlier, we do have capacity at the high school level. We do have capacity at the elementary level, doing pretty well at the intermediate level as well. What about our two very, very large junior highs? And if we bring kids in at the elementary or intermediate level, eventually they're going to end up in junior high. And so that's something that if we were to go down that road, we'd have to really think about. We wouldn't want to have somebody come in here for 3 years and say, oh, sorry, you're in 7th grade, you've got to go back.
Well, I was thinking if we're losing enrollment to charter schools.
And that is something that we could look at. We are still forecasting a net growth because as we did in the latest update from our demographers, we're building a lot of homes. And we're building homes at a price point that brings kids. If you think about that, a lot of starter homes or move-up homes that have kids. So we're optimistic in the sense that even with the increased charter school competition that we have here, we still think we're going to grow about 1%. So we will continue to monitor that. If we see things that are different, we can certainly come back and continue that conversation. If it's the will of the board for us to engage in that dialogue, we're certainly willing to do that. But I just want us to know there's financial benefits, but as we bring more kids in, there's more costs associated with them. It would be more than offset by the additional revenue.
Is there any way we can determine by who doesn't register this year, who's going to charter school or how? I
So
know
we get, actually, we do get a report, it's called a lever report. So and we get that in, Francisco's not here, but I believe it's in April.
It's, right after spring break.
Right, after spring break, we get that. So somebody is here this year, and then they go to a Texas public school or Texas charter school, we get that. If they go to be homeschooled, we don't know. Or if they go to John Paul II, we won't know. But we can definitely look at how many are going to Randolph
that
and to
would
the
help
different
us
ones.
predict.
Yes, and those numbers, we bring in, we do have limited open enrollment in this district by board policy. For anyone who resides in a district that does not have ROTC, those kids come in and are part of our ROTC program, or the same thing for International Baccalaureate, and employee children. So that brings in about 300 students a year. And the net has been going up. I think the last year was 1,200. I believe that went out. So, and again, a lot go to Randolph too. If you think about our military community, people come into the community having only done on-base education. So a lot of people opt for that. It's a smaller school district too.
Okay.
I see that one, I'm sitting there looking at it, on the appropriation side, we've got 3.2 million for compensation increase and 800,000 for health insurance increase. Those numbers are zero out the rest of the way, but we already know that health insurance is probably going to go up, so that number could be another 500,000 next year, it could be 500,000 the year after that, which would make it even worse. And there's no way to know that, obviously, but
You are correct.
that's a possibility. And then if we get a compensation increase, because we know districts around us are going to be raising their compensation for hourly, and we get stuck in the same situation again, we could be right back here again doing another 2 million on that side to try and catch up where we are now.
So,
Can I just jump in real quick? So I think it's very important for us to have this next 3 years on there, but there's a lot that can happen. We have one legislative session that's coming up in the spring. We'll have another one 2 years after that. A lot of things can change. What we're trying to do when we show this is not say, well, we're not giving a compensation increase, or we're not adding this, or we're definitely going to grow this number of students. It's just, let's look at it and give us just kind of a picture of that. And what it shows is, yeah, those would be some hefty, those would be some hefty deficits on there. But again, to the point I was talking about with Mr. Swart is, we will, that 7.1 or whatever it is would be less than that. What we don't know is what that will look like. So as we go through year by year, the projections get tighter and tighter.
That's what you're saying. We don't know what those are going to be, so if we start having those deficits are going to get worse and worse, and the state's still not going to compensate us for those. We're still going to be behind the 8 ball, even bigger 8 ball than we are now. Basically, we had to do that going years out. Is that your statement?
That is, and again, it's a slow-moving train, so we can see it coming. We'll know what's happening. There's ways to increase revenue. There's ways to decrease costs. We're pretty lean in some of the things that we have done. I think it's a 4CP day today, right, JD?
Yes.
There are things that we have done on that. I know you guys have tasked the administration in years past to really look at that. And our class sizes are big, and we don't have the same amount of help that we have. So that's going to be hard in some of those areas to reduce a lot.
Well, what I was getting at is we're lean right now. That would put us even, leaner situation than we are right now with no, if the legislature doesn't change anything, we would still be even worse off than we are right now.
That's correct. So, but there's yes, sir. It's important to look at what our near-term needs are and what our intermediate-term needs are. There's no way we'll know what our needs are 10 years down the road.
So, not trying to take what appears to be bleak numbers, but again, we're not gonna spend all of our budget, so what's showing as a big deficit now, when we get to that year, will be this much, and so on. But since we went ahead and showed the cost of what a 2.5% and a 3% pay increase this year would be, we're gonna redo this 5-year look at 2.5% and at 3%. So if we move to a 3%, what we're showing this year as a $5.9 million deficit budget would become a $6.4 million deficit budget. And then the future years are also affected by, like we said, $500,000, because for every 0.5% you go up, it's $500,000. In your handout, there's also what happens at 3%. I don't want to go through all these numbers. We've beaten these slides up quite a bit. But just know, to Mr. Swartz's point, that if we go there, that's awesome, but it accelerates the changes that we'll have to make in the future.
Accelerates depletion of the fund balance quickly.
Correct.
Mr. Vice President, if I could jump in real quick. Members of the board, we are on the budget portion of our called meeting today. Second portion of this is going to be board's training on the strategic plan. Dr. Crystal Cross is here for that. Dr. Cross has a hard out at 7:30. If you look at your watches, it is 6:15 because she has to get on a plane. So I think we're looking at, where's Crystal? Dr. Cross, about an hour is what we're looking at? Okay. So if we can just be mindful of that, I just got that confirmation on that number. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to jump now into the debt service fund for the first time. Here is our current debt structure. These are our total debt payments by year going in the future. We have debt going out 24 years from today. The yellow bar indicates interest payments and the green bar indicates principal payments. So you can see we're very steady for about the next 10 years, and then it starts to go down. So we spoke a lot already about the M&O tax. Now we're going to take a look at the interest and sinking or debt service tax rate. So here's historically where we've been in terms of the rate and how much of a tax levy that rate generates. So you can see, so since 1617, the rate has gone up. It's gone up 2 pennies. But that levy has generated 46% more taxes, so that helps us pay for the increased debt that was added into 2013 bonds and 2016 bonds. So thank you, property value increases on this side, because we could keep the rate relatively flat and still make all of the payments on those 2 bond initiatives. Now though, let's combine it with what a homeowner sees, which is the total rate. I mean, I know if you look closely enough at your bill, you'll see both, but they really care about the total. So in the same amount of time, we've gone up 2 cents on INS, but The overall rate has decreased 12 cents because of the compression starting with 2019. We know that we're gonna go down at another 4.5 cents this year. And I speculated that beginning with 23, 24, that they may accelerate some of that compression because they're using, the state is using too low of property growth numbers. So if they redo their assumptions on property growth, it's gonna redo our compression rates. And that will only bring the rates down even quicker. So here are our next 5 years debt payments. So the restructurings that we did through the last few refundings have really brought us to a level debt service of 30.1 million over the next 5 years. So that's going to stay very consistent. So this year we levied 47 cents and we brought in 30.8 million. If we keep the rate at 47 cents, obviously we have enough tax revenue to cover the payments of 30.1 million. But we also know that property tax values are going up, which means that the 47 cents next year would bring in more revenue than it does this year. That provides us some options for either managing our portfolio and or making a change to the debt rate. What I'm about to talk about next was brought up at, I believe, the July budget workshop last year. So some of you were here, some of you weren't. And I'm going to reiterate on some of what Lucas Janda from Live Oak presented, and just but give a couple of examples of things that the options the board has available to them. We can defease debt. Funny word. Basically, it means to render null or void is a defeasance. We like to say it's, to simply put it in bond language, you're paying off bonds early. So if the district has sufficient funds available to pay off principal early, it can declare a defeasance and they call bonds. So typically, a bond has a call date 10 years after the date of issuance. So if we issue a bond August 1 of 2022, we will be able to pay it off early if we have the money August 1, 2032. So once that date is passed, a bond is then deemed callable. So any date after that 10-year date, it can be on that date, 40 days after that date, 200 days after that date, 5 years after that date, you can call that bond as soon as you pass that 10-year mark. So at any point then you can call it, and then those bonds are rendered null and void. They don't exist anymore. So how do we generate the revenue sufficient to do a defeasance or a call of bonds? All of the rules for truth and taxation for school districts are run through the state comptroller's office. They publish all of the worksheets, all of the rules codifying the law. The calculations tell us what our minimum rate needs to be, what our rate needs to be to make just the minimum debt payments for the next year, the required minimum debt payments, and no more. The board as a body can choose to levy a rate higher than the rate that's calculated in the truth and taxation worksheets if they have callable debt, and at the same meeting that they levy the tax rate, they also pass a resolution to call those bonds. So what you're saying, what the board does is they say, I am going to add to my principal payments this year, therefore I can adopt a rate incrementally higher than what the comptroller's worksheets say. So here's an example of what happens when you defease debt. We issued $5 million of bonds at a 4% interest rate. They were issued in 2013. They mature 2038, so they go out 25 years. So over 25 years, if you let it stay out all the way to maturity, you're gonna make a $200,000 interest payment every year for 25 years. So that's a total interest payment of $5 million on top of the $5 million in principal. It had a call date of 2/1/2023. You choose to call those bonds at the date we assign the tax rates. We pay off the principal 2/1/2023. Every one of those interest payments after 2/1/2023 don't have to happen because the bond doesn't exist anymore. So you've taken a bond that was gonna have $5 million of interest payments over its life, and you knock that down to $3 million of interest payments by choosing to use a portion of a tax rate to call principal early. I had, at a previous district, done this multiple times, saving millions and millions of dollars of interest. And it can be done. We have the capacity, I believe, next year, with the way property values are going, to call about $5.4 million in debt. That would save future taxpayers over the next 8 years about $1.7 million in interest payments. So that's less burden on future taxpayers. We can do that. We can bring the rate all the way down to do the minimum. We can do some rate in between. I just wanted to let you know what your options as a board are. And if you want any more discussion on this, I'll be more than happy to bring Lucas to the July budget workshop. He's out of town today, so he wasn't able to make it.
So we've been working to manage our debt for a long time, and as you can see over the last two refinancings we did, we've got a level term payment of about $30.1 million. We have done that traditionally by refinancing for a lower rate than what we got when we sold the bonds. So this is a different tool for us. We want to just kind of present this again. We talked about it last year. Have y'all think on that, and if this is something that we want to continue a conversation on. As Brian said, we're happy to bring folks in here.
And to that point, we are now in a rising interest rate market, which makes refundings less attractive. They provide less savings. This would be an option to provide, again, not savings today, but savings in the future when refunding debt doesn't make sense.
And increases capacity.
And it increases capacity because you're lowering future years of payments, so it increases your capacity for when we do say, now is the time to ask the voters to go out for that junior high. And we can tell them, despite what the ballot's gonna say, thank you, JD, that it is not gonna be a tax rate increase. If there's no questions or discussions on debt service,
Any questions?
all right.
Thank you.
Then again, here's your upcoming timelines, like we put at the end of every meeting. We will see you again June 1st for the regular and July 19th for the workshop. And if there's no other comments or questions, I am done with my agenda item.
Can we go ahead and bring back for the July budget meeting, what's his name, Lucas?
Yes.
Just to kind of go over that again?
Yes.
Is he available July 19th? We'll find out.
Let's see if I can make them available.
Let's find out.
Okay, if there's no questions or comments, we can close that portion and go on to the next part, which is discussion with our report items, our strategic plan, bond training, or board training. And it's going to be with Fiscal and Dr. Cross.
Dr. Cross? You're up.
Oh, there's the word. I couldn't see it.
Like Dr. Edie said, she's about an hour, be mindful of that, because we need to get out here no later than 7:30.
Okay. You've called the agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Cross, we're ready. Do you need this computer, or what do you need?
I think it's picking me up.
Okay, excellent. Can we get her to share? you log on twice in there?
Yeah, have you been on this today?
Decided to be contrary.
Any of y'all, any of you guys with computers can try?
Yeah, Dean's trying, we just
Okay.
have her.
Are you sure?
82B. Hey.
There's always another way.
What are you looking for?
Mail.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
Close it.
All right, good evening, everyone. So welcome to this portion of the board workshop, and for those of you on the perimeter, also I know here's the board, but absolutely you can share in the pieces. There'll be some discussion, and just to be a little bit more familiar with these pieces, I previously presented the board meeting, so you will be seeing some of these pieces again, but having a chance to dig a little bit further into it. So I am Dr. Crystal Cross, and E2L's mission is about supporting the public schools. So we're here just to be partners with you. And in this time that we have together, we really just want you to have a chance to collaborate and talk. You won't have to tweet, you won't worry about tweeting. But the agenda, very short, where we're going to talk about the design process again, the strategic plan, the plan in action, your learning framework, and then we have a next step to follow up. So here's the design process. These are all the pieces that were in place to get to the items that you have in front of you. So one of the biggest things that's so important to remember is that the community feedback and involvement is a big portion of this work. And I think you can read all those other points, but the last point is also huge because all the products are based upon agreement. And so I want to reiterate that because what that means is this was not majority rules. This meant when the design process was happening, the design team that was composed of a variety of people, including some of the board members who are a part of that work, but a variety, students, adults, great group represented. When it comes to coming to agreement, it couldn't be, oh, you know what, I really don't like that. So if it was any of that, we discussed it. There were things that didn't make because we couldn't come to agreement, or they couldn't. I wasn't involved in it because it belongs to you all. I was just the facilitator. So that is very key to what you'll be looking at today. So this is a video. If you'll take a look at, no. Saw this video at the board meeting, but wanted to look at it again. And as you look at it, if you'll think about what resonates with you about this video.
Thank you, Chris. Other Chris.
We were looking for a way to increase community engagement. This is actually our fourth strategic plan. This is our first one with Engage to Learn.
You have a school district with 16,000 students and 2,000 staff, but you also have the community we're trying to support.
The design team that was created that consists of teachers and some district staff, our community members, our parents, and especially our students, has been vital to that.
Some key points are brought up that you're like, I never thought about it that way. It gets you out of your comfort zone to see what other people are thinking and how they're thinking, and vice versa. You learn from them, they learn from you.
I had never met the superintendent before, and I feel a lot of buy-in from him and from the other staff, administration, and then having students here is just, the first day I showed up, I looked around, I see a sophomore sitting next to me, and I was like, yes, this is what we need.
I feel like this is a great opportunity to make students feel more comfortable and just be able to speak a little bit more freely than they used to.
We have 8 great students that are coming here, and so to be able to turn to that and not just, have them as a part of the survey, but have them at the table has been huge for us.
I'm really happy to be part of this. I feel very included to be able to give my input. I think it'll grow the community altogether, like, into one.
I really want where I live to have a successful school district. I believe that this is really important work, and it's important to the community so that they'll feel good sending their kids to Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City Independent School District.
How are we going to help our students deal with a changing world that is changing even more rapidly than ever before? How do we embrace that change? And I thought Engage to Learn would bring that understanding of that change.
For me, the most important thing is that we come out with a product that is going to help our students be prepared for the future.
What excites me for the students that are coming after me is learning that they can have flexibility and choice in their learning. A lot of times teachers will ask us and say, hey, like, how do you learn best? But they don't really do anything with that information. We all just learn the basic lecture. So having that option and us like working on that goal probably be the best legacy to leave.
People want to feel appreciated and valued. They want to feel like they're part of the organization. They want to feel like everyone knows that they're contributing to the organization and really contributing to student learning and growth.
This process made me feel like I am a stakeholder. I am valued and my opinions are valued.
I'm a teacher, so having a say in what they're kind of like requiring of us and what they expect of us, I like that. Because I'm like, what if they know this?
Everybody's being listened to. If you have an objection or have a question, we actually take the time to go through it and to pick it apart and really dig in and figure out what the problem is and fix it.
Those are big components of that from the human resource side of it, as well as ensuring that our teachers, really anybody, paraprofessionals, instructional aides, principals, assistant principals, I include everybody, that there is a genuine feeling that the people we're supporting feel that they are supported by district, by board, by community. That's what's going to keep people here. But what I think will separate this strategic plan from the ones that we've done in the past is the development of real action plans.
So we're actually going to marry the goals with an action. Before we have the goals, but we never really form an action to make those goals happen.
Having a plan that involves such detailed preparation, I think will go a long way in ensuring the success and ensuring that this is something that we do always keep at the forefront of our mind over the next 4 years.
So if you would, just for a moment. If you would, for a moment, turn with the partner or someone sitting next to you and just talk briefly about what resonated with you from this video. hear from at least one person within this section that would like to share either something you shared or something your partner said.
This is when you can throw your partner under the bus.
I love it.
Belinda just said.
And that's how it works.
How she really liked the perspective was from everyone. It wasn't like this is, coming from the district or the board or, that student had a voice, the parents had a voice, the community had a voice, teachers, admin. So that's what she really enjoyed and took away from that.
All right.
Is that, the student voice was very vocal and that they had a voice and their voice mattered.
Absolutely. Anything else?
So, thunder.
Okay, that's what you wanted to say.
That very similar to that, it was community involvement, student involvement, we got that very distinct perspective from the student because they're the ones living it on day to day, and this is all for them anyway. So it gives us that idea that when we do something, we do need to remember the students. Because if we're doing it for any other reason, then what are we doing it for again? And then, but you also have the community coming in realizing that we're all in this together. The only way we're going to have a good school district is we've got to have community buy-in, we've got to have everybody's input to make it as good as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And the thing about it is, yes, we have a great videographer, but this wasn't where you had to hunt and find great pieces to include or to make it look a certain way. There really was collaboration. There was a lot of talking. There was a lot of work. There was a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating every single product and coming to agreement. So with those strategic design components, again, a reminder of all the pieces that went into it, beginning with engaging that community piece and working all the way through to we're now here at LEAD at the board workshop. And so you may be seeing this again and again, but we want you to be comfortable with it and continue to dig into it a little bit more each time. So the intentional design. So everything is done for a reason. We often would tell people, trust the process. And so that's what happened, and that's why you have the items you have sitting in front of you. But beginning with that community input that was collected several different ways, how we use that information, because throughout this process and building, it was always, yes, you are here representing a group of people, but also let's go back to the community survey and keep that in mind too. So those pieces were all pulled together to kind of go through this process to make sure you had the opportunity, or they had the opportunity to do a SWOT analysis. So that's looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, pulling critical opportunities from there, and then coming up with the goals. So you have a document, your strategic design framework document. It looks like this, if you'll grab that, because you'll need that for a portion of the next piece. So it has our beliefs at the very top. And again, this was created by you all. It exists no place else. As the facilitator, we were just here to take you all through the process. So first we have the beliefs and just coming up with what do we believe, because before you can create anything, you want to figure out what your shared beliefs are. This is another one where you had to come to agreement, and the idea of shared beliefs is that these are all things that we're holding in common. If we don't hold it in common, then it didn't make the list of shared beliefs. Then there was the call to action. So this was just like almost a rallying cry, just a reminder of, and again created by you all, of what's important, the call to action, what drives us. And then next they developed 4 learner outcomes. So again, they felt that every student will graduate or transition with, and they have those 4 things listed there. So I'll give you a moment to read those 4. Yes, sir.
What does transition mean?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, sorry. Because I was going to talk about that.
It's yours.
So a lot of times you'll see this, we want our kids to graduate with this. Well, what does that do for a second grade teacher or second grade student, right? So we have a lot of transitions in the school district. We transition from elementary to intermediate, from 4th to 5th grade, from intermediate to junior high from 6th to 7th, and junior high school from 8th to 9th. So we don't just want to have our kids ready by the end. We want to have them ready by the end of elementary school for the next step, intermediate school, junior high, and so on and so forth.
I would say we also want every teacher to be able to see every graduate and say, I was a part of that. I
we want them to come to graduation. We want them to feel like they were part of the success of every student that graduates.
Success of their student.
Yeah.
Right.
Just one other add, we have such a high military population, kids come and go from us quite often, and we said we want them to leave with some of these things too, because we may never see them again, but that doesn't mean that we don't want them to have some of these skills as they go.
Sure. Great, thank you.
All right, that's when you know it's yours. I as the facilitator, shouldn't answer that question because it belongs to them. So nice work with that. So now you're going to have a partner talk on a couple of pieces. This learner profile, again, this is for every SCUC student, regardless of the grade level. So we don't have a thing where, okay, this is just for the older ones, or only certain kids can have these skills developed. But these are the things that they want developed in all students, and if they already have these skills, then strengthen. And then there is the leader profile. So you're going to look at the learner profile and the leader profile, check those two out. And you're going to talk with a partner again. And the question is, how can you see the leader and learner profiles being used by both campus and district staff? So when you're ready, go for it. All right, now let's hear from someone different. What did you hear or share? Someone that hasn't shared yet in this.
Feel free to volunteer your part.
That's right.
Who's not even your partner?
Just one.
Well, okay, I'm gonna just jump out since everybody's so bashful.
Okay.
We had a great conversation over here. I just wanted to go to the learner profile, and the number one is communicates. Going through that process, that came through so much in the engagement report. We saw that in our survey and our focus groups. That really came through that our students need to be able to communicate in a variety of ways and modalities, and so that it's on the learner profile and it's number one, or at the top of it, not number one, but I think it was a real reflection of what we saw.
All right.
Now somebody else.
Yeah, we said we're talking about the alignment between the leader profile and the learner profile, and how, one of the best ways for the children the students to achieve their profile is to see an example of it from their teacher, from their staff that are helping them.
Nice connection, thank you.
We'll
will add that we talked about our leader profile could start to be used to develop interview questions for future leadership positions, or even a evaluation tool perhaps, if that's something that we're interested in. But scenario type things, presentations you do for an interview, those might be a good place for us to start.
Excellent. Okay, here's the next one. So there are 5 goals. And the question is, what strategic design goal are you most excited to realize and why? To see realized and why? So review the 5 and kind of think about the one you're most excited about. Even if you're more excited about one, just pick one. Okay, and go ahead and talk to your partner about which one you picked and why. All right, if you'll get ready to wrap up your conversation. And my partner's going to start. I didn't volunteer him. I asked him if he would mind sharing.
She was not going to throw me in.
I
wasn't. So sure, I like number 2 is the one that stands out a lot for me. And it really is the opportunities for student choice for our students in that challenging learning environment. Many of you know that I have a child just graduated 4.0 in chemical engineering from A&M. And my youngest child's in ALE. And so, you know, when you look at challenging environment for both of those children, individual, student choice, their individual passions and endeavors, I think that one has a lot of potential to do a lot for our kids. So.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on?
I have 3 children in the district, and so I have a sophomore and a 6th grader and a 1st grader now. And I'm like JD, just looking at the differences between my kids, and I was sharing with Kelly, I was like, even though I'm an educator, I don't know how to sometimes really lead and guide them in terms of all the things that are out there for them. So it excites me to know that they're going to have so many opportunities to just pursue and explore things that I didn't have and things that I don't currently even know right now as an adult, as their parent. So number 2 is the same for me.
Thank you. So for specific results, each goal has specific results listed underneath it. And so as you can see, goal 1 has a total of 3 specific results. The one in blue is a specific result that was focused on for year 1, meaning for the 22-23 school year, we want to be able to accomplish that specific result. The specific results help to attain the goal. It's like, how do we know we're on track? If this is the big idea, if this is what we're reaching for, how are we going to know that we are getting there? And so, again, there are 3 specific results. The blue one is year 1. For goal 2, again, happened to be 3. This was something else that they came to agreement on and figure out. Now, once they agreed upon the goal, then we had to figure out how are we going to know we're getting there. And they had to come to agreement on the year 1 specific results. For goal 3, there are 3. For goal 4, there's 1 specific result. And for goal 5, you have 3. So again, the goal is the big overarching idea. The specific results are how are we going to get there? How do we know we're moving in the right direction? So here's the question, and this is for our board members. In your role as a board member, how can you support the successful implementation of the year 1 specific results? So those are the 3 specific results that they're going to concentrate on working and accomplishing by the end of 22-23. And so discuss this question with your partner. If you're not a board member, you can still discuss it. You can role play as if you were. Okay? So go ahead and get started on that. All right, if you will thank your partner for sharing. And not to put any of our board members on the spot, but because this was a question specific to you, we'd love to hear from anyone. I won't volunteer anyone, but y'all feel free to share.
We came up with the idea that provide information resources for the students to confidently choose the courses they want to take and clubs they want to join. We thought that was something we could do pretty quickly. We already do some of that now, if I could do quite a bit of it, but can we do it better? Can we give them those choices sooner? Can we give them the counseling that they need so they make good decisions? We don't want them to get down to junior year and go, oops, all of a sudden, this is not going to be good for my college years. I could have taken, I've blown 2 years, and I could have gone a different direction. Catch them earlier, give them all the opportunity. Here's the paths you can take, and that way they can make a decision more confidently. Are we going to be 100%? No, but because kids will change. But give them that information so they have a much better chance of getting what they want by the time they graduate and go on to college or wherever they end up going. But if they're all over the place, then they really don't have that path established going forward. And how can we help them get that path? Well, it's to let them know or help them make those choices earlier on. And that means be there, and when they come out of 8th grade, when they go to 9th grade, be there with them then. Like Dr. Ely said, provide tours for them. Here's what we have, here's what we don't have. CTE classes or other classes with a CNA, other kinds of culinary arts. They need to see all that earlier so they can make those decisions, make better decisions going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So things like social opportunities for student and staff engagement, the board could come to those things, be a part of them, share in some of that social opportunity to get to know our staff and our staff to get to know them. I think that would be a really cool way to support some of the things that we're doing. And then on 1.2, there might be some board policies or things that actually might limit our ability to do this. And so if we need to change those, that might be the role of the board, is to help kind of support any board policy changes that may stand in the way, perhaps.
All right.
Or initiatives or can start. Help you all.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to our next section, but I did want to highlight in your folder that action plans for each of the year one specific results have been included. And so that is there if you would like to look through that at some point. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say really quickly, the way this is organized, first of all, this is kind of our draft. It's going to make its way to the district improvement plan later, but you all had asked, okay, what's the plan? How are we going to get there? And each one of these is divided up into topics. So when you think about how do you try to address, expand district procedures, protocols, and practices, some things are related to guidelines, some things are related to, like, what's the next one? Messaging, and then some are related to building capacity infrastructure. So you can kind of see that it's organized in such a way that we try to break those down even more to make it cohesive, I guess, for goal writing and trying to make sure that we got everything done. When you look at it, though, you're probably like, why do we keep doing 1.2? When are we going to get to 2.2? It's because we had multiple iterations of how are we going to address 1.2.
That's pretty long.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's shift our minds into the learning framework analysis. So that first part was your strategic design pieces, but there's also your learning framework. So again, we call this the bow tie. You have a copy of it, and this only belongs to you all. It has the learner profile skills that were created on the far left, the learner outcomes on the right. In the middle is the learning framework, so that perform, engage, learn, and explore. That was developed and created by you all, this entire thing. Of course, the call to action is at the top. At the very bottom, those are what we call our E2L Life Ready best practices. And so in the field of education, the term best practice is often used. And you hear terms like assessment and differentiation. It should be aligned to the standards or the TEKS. But being able to really understand, well, what does that mean? How do we come to a common understanding of what that is? So the best practices were all used as part of building out the framework for you all. And they decided to call it the dynamic growth model. So you see the name of the dynamic growth model in the middle. So we're going to talk about the dynamic growth model, because it's great for us to have a learner profile and say we want all these things, our kids to develop these skills or have these skills. And it's great to have these outcomes, but the question becomes, how do we make sure this happens? And so having the dynamic growth model that can be implemented at any grade level is what's going to help to get you all there. And even though you may be working there, help to even further it. So you also will have inside your packet this document, and this document has several portions. Thank you, Kelly. And it has each of the stages. So engage is a stage. And as they were building out this dynamic growth model, what we had to make sure is that all of the best practices were included throughout the 4 stages. So all of them didn't have to be included in one stage, but again, it helps to ensure we are never building things just so it looks cute or good on paper. It has to be about students, and it has to be based on research-based practices. So each stage has the research-based best practices linked to it that the kids get to accumulate, go through within that process. Then, if you keep flipping, you'll see protocols. So student protocols and educator protocols. Again, this was created by the design team. You will not find this anywhere else. And so for each of the stage, they had to think about, well, what are they doing in this stage? And what is the student's role and what is the educator's role in each of those stages? So I want you to just take a moment and kind of look at each stage and look to just see what's happening in the student protocols and educator protocols. Okay, so you've had a chance to look through it. You'll notice there's another paper in your folder, and it is your framework analysis folder. And we are gonna complete the 3 boxes on the front, and there's 1 box on the back. What you're going to do, stage 1 is going to be the engage stage. With that paper you have, you're going to draw what you believe is happening in each of these stages. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you read the student and educator protocols, so you're just going to do a quick sketch of what's happening in each stage. So again, stage 1 is engage, stage 2 is learn, stage 3 is explore, and on the flip side, stage 4 is perform. Okay? So I know you may not be the best artist, but all you're doing, you read it, and you're going to try to draw a little sketch of what's happening during that stage. Are there any questions before y'all start drawing? All right?
Do we have to?
Yes.
I was asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I was like, is this fairness that we're in this process and already like did this pretty much?
Yes, yes, yes. So yours should be phenomenal. Okay, so it's just a sketch. You're not going into any art contest.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds per stage, so you have about 2 minutes to draw what you think is happening in all 4 stages, as best as you can.
This is what it felt like to be in the
Yes.
room.
Yes.
Because we had very little time to do big work.
All right, get started. What do you believe is happening? Just draw it out as best as you can. Stick figures are fine. little extra time, 30 more seconds. All right, so now, we won't be projecting these, but you will turn to someone next to you, kind of share what you came up with your drawings. And it's no contest, but you're just debriefing on what you thought it was.
I was better this time. I know, me too. I was like, oh,
Okay, so.
I'm sure Amy. I want to see your pictures. Sir, I want to see your pictures.
Nobody taps in here.
I was better this time. No, the funny thing is actually the Explorer was the surface level, like digging through our learning. To me, the biggest thing is was the links, the making the connections. That's what I learned. Well, the funny thing is, I focus on like what I always as a kid, I was a great messenger. But I was always excited when I wanted to
like you better. Let's go with that.
So my linking, yeah, we did this.
In full disclosure.
I didn't spend much time today. I learned was like making connections with my linking. There was a lot of listening, exploring, getting to the surface level, making connections, and then for me, just the ability to express. Like that was always for me.
Have about 15 more seconds. All right, so thoughts about the learning framework? Anything that as you were drawing a phase or even looking at the whole thing, what are your thoughts or comments about the framework and what was created?
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
Any thoughts you have about the framework, whether it was a particular phase or even the whole framework collectively?
I'll talk about Ed, what he drew out, and he was really able to, while it wasn't beautiful, he was able to look at it from an educator and from a learner profile, and look at what they're doing in each of those phases, so how they come together when they're engaging, and then what the educators doing this a little bit different during the learning to help and support, and then during the performing, just guiding as needed. And then, yeah, I guess at the end of performing is, sitting there and assessing and applauding, really. And he was able to take that and link those all the way through, all 4 of them, and really look at it from both of those lenses. I thought that was really good.
He's gonna make me blush.
I love it.
Really,
Any other thoughts or comments about the framework or a particular stage?
One thing that ends up coming out in me is that no one student is going to do it the same way, no one teacher is going to do it the same way. It's going to depend on the collaboration between each student and each educator as far as how far that student goes, how fast they get there, what they need to learn, what they don't need to learn, and their own motivation. I mean, we always talk about, well, teachers need to come in and motivate their students. Well, there's another flip side of that. How motivated are the students? How do we motivate them so they want to learn, so they want to, what's the word? I hear it in a minute. Oh, shoot. I get it. So they want to learn, and then once they learn it, so they can explore what they have learned and make sure that which way they want to go. Like we're talking about going from 8th grade to 9th grade. Well, if they don't know what they were, if they don't know what they need to learn, they're not going to be able to explore going forward. And if they don't explore what those possibilities are, what are they going to perform?
Right.
They won't know. They're going to be running around trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this? So it's not just these 4 things. It's how do we incorporate that all the way through all 13 or 14 years to get them there, but also understanding that not every student's going to be the same way, not every teacher's going to teach the same way, and embrace those differences. And if we can do that, we're going to come out way ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to say that when we were with the committee, the teachers really appreciated this idea of protocols because it starts to say, but how does this impact me in my classroom? And this is like an easy to follow guide almost of here's what we mean by incorporating best practices in your classroom. Like this is it, and you don't have to guess what those things are that could make a difference for your kids. So they appreciated that. I just remember them saying that in their group.
And I remember the question coming up early on, like when you look at the learner profile, like how are we going to make sure this really happens? How's this going to move beyond words just on a paper? And so the framework, again, is that connection to kind of pull out if we are who we say we are, then what are the opportunities that we're going to give? And we make sure, regardless of classroom, whether you end up with the most phenomenal teacher on earth or you end up with a teacher that's, still learning the craft and figuring things out, the protocols help to make it much more clear. And of course, there has to be training and all of those pieces. But that is the point of the dynamic growth model. So here's our last piece.
10 minutes.
Oh, we're good. We're good. Thank you.
She's going to make us watch. She's watching.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you so much. And so here's what you're going to do. How can the team of 8 most effectively support the implementation of the strategic design? So those are all the pieces you studied at first with the learner profile, the leader profile, the goals, and all those pieces, and the rollout of this dynamic growth model, which you just drew out and looked at. So what do you see that looking like? Give you an opportunity to talk first, and you'll have about a minute or so to kind of talk. You don't have to have it perfect, but you have to draft a 6-word summary of your response to this question. So just 6 words. You can talk, you can say more than 6 words, but just draft a 6-word summary of how you will respond to this question. It could be in a sentence, it could be a series of words, just up to you, all right? So go ahead, get started on that. Think about that question, 6-word summary, and we're gonna do a share out. Yes, we always like to include a little challenge, you know, so the 6-word summary, if you need to go rogue and you want to add something to it, that's fine. You will not get in trouble for that. All right, in about 10 more seconds, gonna see if anybody is willing to share with the group their 6-word summary or something close to that process. All right, we got a volunteer.
But don't count the ampersand. I'm innovating. Help developers develop operational definitions and marketing.
Nice.
Help developers develop?
Yep.
We'll take it. Thank you. Anyone else?
We came up with 6 words that kind of went along. Celebrate. We now have a way to go. We're going to align how we do things to match this. We're going to support that alignment so everybody knows that we're supportive of their efforts to make our better school system. Empower those people to make the change they need to make. Monitor the results and see if, you know, how it's going. And then we're all done with the process. Then we're going to reassess and start the process again. Because if you don't reassess where you're at, then you need to be able to look and see, here we are, what can we do better, and then go back through the process again. It's kind of like the cycle we've already said, it's kind of another cycle that we can go through. The board can kind of help that process on our own. We don't want to get down in the weeds, but what can we do to help the teachers and administration do a better job? We need to monitor because we are responsible to the public. As far as, you know, we're kind of I can't get the right word out of my mouth right now. Trustees. We're trusted to do the right thing for the public dollar to provide education, but at the end of the day, we still need to reassess that and make sure, can we do it better next time? Because this is a continuing process.
So the 6 words were really just a suggestion.
My
apologies.
Anyone else want to share?
It was pretty much aligned with
All right.
It's like no talk monitors for the one.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. So, you all, we have one next step in regards to this overall bid process. The next thing coming up is the leadership training, and that takes place on June 14th. And so that'll be the last piece of all of the design pieces that started with the very beginning of collecting this information. And that is it. Just thank you for everything. And I've been here since y'all started the process of designing all the work, so to be able to see it to this point has been great working with your community and the people here. It's been really good, and I appreciate it. So every time I see the video, I smile because I think about everything that went into each of those conversations and how committed the students were, the staff, the community, just everyone in that process, how committed they were to very long days and very intense work. So I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna, you have a minute and a half,
Good.
so I was just gonna say that the leadership training day in the morning is really talking about a lot of what we did today, but at a broader scale of how does this fit into the district improvement plan? What does this mean for us collectively moving forward? And then in the afternoon, it will be taking that same idea and saying, how does this now impact your campus improvement plan and what you'll be doing as a campus leader and your teachers at that level? So that the leadership training day is another full day, but it'll be kind of divided into, okay, what does that mean for the district, and then what does that mean for you as a campus for year one? So just wanted to link those in. And thank you, Crystal. You've been wonderful. Our team has, everybody who was on the strategic planning team, I mean, I would say probably even just those in this room would just say, what an amazing job you did of taking, you know, it's very hard to get 40 people from very different backgrounds to agree on anything, and everything in here was agreed on by the whole group, and that was great facilitation on your part, so thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I enjoy it, I really do. Thank you all for having me.
Hey, Mr. Vice President, if I may, I just would like to say thank you also, Crystal. And Crystal's one of a team that has worked with us. We've met Dr. Dean, Dr. Cross has worked with us. We've had Michelle, we've had Leah, who have come to work with us as well. And all of them have done a fantastic job. But you really kind of shepherded us through this process, and just appreciate what you've done and to help us find our voice and find our direction.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
And I look forward to coming to fruition, like it's here, it's beyond paper, and so to see what will happen next school year, I'm looking forward to seeing it. All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Safe travels. Thank you.
All right, travel safely.
Kelly.
Okay.
Not you.
Oh, no, okay.
If we have thoughts about this, because I know this is all moving forward now, and at some point, I know that the action plans are drafts, as is a number of these things, but I think that the basic structure of the content is essentially there. And so, I don't mean a line-by-line critique of all these things, but if we have ideas about how, maybe the rollout, might be thought of differently, when would be the time that we would, share that with you? Because I guess what I'm saying is that if the time to speak up goes by, then, it's going to be very difficult to have an impact on
Sure. Let me just jump in there and say, if you have that, I would welcome you to sit down with me, have a conversation, phone, let's get together and talk about that.
Okay.
This is not a tornado. This is a slow-moving type of weather phenomenon. If I'm going to extend that metaphor, which I really don't think I should have. But it is. We've got a lot more of this developing out, fleshing out what this is going to look like, putting in the district improvement plan, developing those things. So there's plenty of time for reflection and feedback on just how we operationalize it, and I would enjoy a conversation about that. If there are any thoughts that you might have.
This is definitely a 35,000-foot level. Here's what we want to have happen. Now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty.
That's why I thought it'd be good to talk about it.
And completed that, we're going to closed session. The board will now adjourn the closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Section 551.074, authorization to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, or to hear a complaint or charge against an officer or an employee. 7:32. Agenda is request for board action, employment of contractual personnel. Ms. Cannon, please.
Yes, the positions on the employment list as presented in closed session are replacing positions for the 21-22 school year as well as the 22-23, and will be funded from those budgets, general operating budgets.
Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Trustees approve the employment list as presented.
Mr. Schwartz.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Have any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Our next item is employment of principal for Schertz-Cibolo-Universal ISD with placement at Laura Ingalls Wilder Intermediate School. Ms. Cannon.
Yes, the position for the Laura Ingalls Wilder Intermediate Principal is replacing a budgeted position for the 22-23 school year and funded for the general operating budget.
I move the Board of Trustees approve the employment of Laura Ingalls Wilder Intermediate Principal for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. And next item is employment of Director of Special Education for SCUC ISD. Ms. Cannon.
Yes, the position of the Director of Special Education is replacing a budgeted position for the 22-23 school year and funded for the general operating budget.
I move the Board of Trustees approve the employment of Director of Special Education for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those approved, raise your hand. Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
Can I just say real quick?
Sure.
Just a reminder, day after tomorrow, Thursday, we have our ISO training in this room, 6 o'clock start time, instead of the 5 we had today. So look forward to bringing our friends in here and have a good discussion about student outcomes. What's that?
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.